Hello, my name is Rico, and this is my Thunderthon submission for Crash Bandicoot 4. It's about time any percent. This game is very new. It's actually only like a little under 2 months old. Came out at the beginning of October, but it's got a lot of really cool tech and skips in it already, and it's just like a constantly evolving run. So yeah, let's just get into it. So, you're gonna see the timer like dial back a little bit. That's just because we do load this timing and we have a like extension in live split that lets us do that. But yeah, so much like other Crash games, the primary movement is slide spinning. The slide spin is really cool in this game though, because for one, you can cancel the slide and spin into each other much faster than you can in other Crash games. So you kind of have just like this constant slide spin movement that's really fast. And another thing that's really cool about it is that the slide itself has a nice property in this game that the devs called Coyote Time, where as long as you're sliding, your gravity is actually completely halted, and you can use that to traverse a lot of gaps that you wouldn't be able to otherwise. And it definitely comes into play a lot. That was the first of many guardrail sections. They're essentially auto-scrollers, and there's a handful of them throughout the run. They're not really that interesting speed-wise, but they're a nice little break, which is nice, because this is longer than most other Crash speedruns. Just because like the game itself is longer, there's more levels, and there's just the levels themselves are just longer. And then here's a little like shortcut you can do in this moving platform section. It's one of the few places where we use the body slam just to skip an entire section of the ascent. But yeah, that was the first level, Rude Awakening. Yeah, so the game kind of moves at a pretty quick pace. There's no level routing. This game is kind of like Crash 1 in the sense that you progress through the levels in a completely linear fashion. And they did this for story purposes. Crash 4 is one of the first games in the series, or one of the only games in the series, that has like a particularly large focus on the story. So by having them go in completely linear order, it was just like more coherent that way. So yeah, this is the second level, Insanity Peak. There's actually a lot of like really interesting cycles you can catch here. Alright. And then here's the first chase section in the level. The first few levels in the run are pretty straightforward. Definitely picks up later. There I did a whole skip. This kind of shows an example of how the slide works in this game, where as long as you're sliding and not spinning or anything, you actually just don't fall. And it lets you just skip a lot of holes like that. And I guess one thing I've noticed, I am playing this on the PlayStation 5. Really, the biggest advantage is of just like the next gen console is consistent 60 FPS and faster loads. The faster loads don't really mean too much because we do loadless timing for the leaderboards, just to make things more fair. But it also like it just ultimately. It's just like a nice quality of life thing to just have faster loads. But really, just like the 60 FPS also doesn't really affect speed too much. Like it causes some like minor differences, but overall it's like not really that different. Alright. So I switched to Coco there. There's no real reason for it. The Crash and Coco are like the same, and the only difference is aesthetic. I just like Coco more, so I just play as her. So this is a real grind. This is the first level with one of the 4 quantum masks. The quantum masks are like the gimmick of this game, where the masks just give you special powers. And the first one is Lonnie Loli. He's the quantum mask of like phase shifting. So basically, every time you hit the like mask power button, some things phase into existence and some things phase out of existence. And this level, this hub in general is kind of just like the showcase of like getting used to that power, and then like, it'll show up across the run. But he's definitely most prominent here. And then this is again more rails. Yeah, there's not too much to talk about during the rail section. Alright, I'm gonna go for a strat here. That hopefully isn't too bad. Oh, well, I messed it up. You can actually, if you go fast enough, you can actually slide spin across these platforms. It lets you get through all of the sharks. And something of note is damage abusing, which is using your masks to just go through obstacles, is kind of it's a thing in like every Crash game. It's very, very prominent in Crash 4 because something that's unique to this game is that you actually don't carry masks over into the next levels. So any mask I leave a level with is lost upon entering the next level. So in this game, it's just best to use your masks as best you can to just bypass enemies. So we'll see a lot of that in the run. Alright, so I didn't get a jump there for some reason. Didn't get a... I don't know what's going on. I was about to say, the Crash Compactor is cool because it's got this little like corner cut right there, and it's got another one right here. Would have been a lot cooler if I got it the first time. There's more face shifting here. I would have used the mask here to damage abuse through these enemies, but I lost it. Alright, yeah, so that didn't go too well, but that's fine. The opening few levels are actually pretty rough to do fast. So I can't really skip this cutscene here. I guess I didn't really mention the way I'm moving along the map. So you can move along the map manually by like hitting the directional buttons, but there's also a level select menu that you can hit, that you can access either through the pause menu or by pressing the touchpad. And as long as you're moving within the same hub, you can actually pick the next level even if you haven't entered it yet. And that just saves time on map movement to just like immediately just pull up the menu and just load the next level. Because it saves the time you have to walk to the next level, and then there's like a little animation to enter it and all that. There are some places where you can't do it. Like entering this level I couldn't because there's an animation for unlocking the first flashback tape, which is unavoidable. And then any time I unlock a new character, because there's alternate characters in this game also. Whenever I do that, I will also not be able to skip any animations. Alright, so yeah, that was a little, just like, elevator skip there. That was actually found very recently. And it just lets you... It's like, normally you have to wait on that elevator and it takes forever. And my damage abuse there to get through that flame. And then... So this is kind of like a little, like... It's a chase section, but it's also a bit of an homage to the ball levels in The Wrath of Cortex, which is the fourth Crash game in the original continuity. So basically in this section, you're stuck in this like steel cage, and your only movement is running. So it's pretty basic, but you also have to make sure to not touch any of these barbed wires and not fall into like the oil pits here or whatever, or the tar pits. Both of them just slow you down, so it's just time loss to get stuck in them. Yeah, other than that, there's not too much for this. Yeah, so it's really just like running out the rest of this part of the level. Alright. Not too bad overall. Alright, so coming up is the first boss fight with Engine. And this is the first like really major skip in the game. So normally the way this fight works is that you have to like dodge all of his attacks and then you get the opportunity to hit him. But we can bypass that entirely. And it's a very intricate skip, so I'll give a very detailed multi-step tutorial. Alright, so step 1. You slide spin them. And that's the skip. It's actually really, really easy. For some reason, I don't think they anticipated being able to land on the rim of the drums like I did. And because of that, they didn't anticipate being able to slide spin Engine. And for some reason, when you slide spin and actually connect both hits, the second hit just skips the entire attacking section of the next phase. And it ends up just saving minutes off of this fight. Because most of these phases are really, really long. So, it just like completely trivializes this fight, which is really nice. Yep, and that was Engine. So, for how young this game is, there are a lot of like really neat skips like that just all throughout any percent, and that's like really, that's one of my favorite things about this run, because generally, like at least in my personal experience, a lot of the times any percent runs in Crash games are like just generally not as interesting as like the 100% or completion runs, and like this game is very much an exception. The any percent is absolutely fascinating. Alright, so this is about where I feel like the run starts to pick up. It's like not in full force yet, but this is where levels get a little interesting. So this is Booty Calls. This is like the pirate themed hub, the Salty Wharf. This level is not too crazy. There's like a couple cycle skips you can get. But first you go through this like really long railway section. Yeah. So I know casually the rails in general are not entirely well liked just because there's so many of them and you can't speed them up at all. Casually I don't think they're that great. In the context of the run, I kind of like them because they're just like little breaks strewn throughout the levels where I don't really have to worry about anything aside from just like jumping and like ducking to dodge some obstacles. Yeah. Alright. So there's a cycle coming up here that like the devs very clearly intended you to have to wait on, but hopefully if I get it right, we won't have to do that. Yeah, so I can just like abuse that there's a little place I can land on there, and it just lets me bypass that. Most of this is pretty straightforward. The nice thing is that I'm like, the cycles just line up where you can avoid all these enemies, because the rats that are like standing on top of each other, you actually cannot hurt them at all. So it's nice that they kind of just line up where I just don't even have to worry about them. Alright, and this is the first level where we play as an alternate character, and this character is an alternate dimension version of Tana, Crash's girlfriend from the first game. And she's an interesting character. As far as movement goes, she basically doesn't really have anything. She has a lot of things that can slow her down, though, so a lot of the movement with her is actually just, like, doing as little as you can with her. Like, anything short of running and just, like, single jumping is slow with Tana. I got that mask just because you have to wait on this rope cycle anyway, so it doesn't lose any time to actually, like, stop and get it. And it'll be useful for going through a cycle later on. And then there's a neat little... You can just double jump over this elevator and it just skips it entirely. It screws with the camera a little bit, but overall it's not too bad. Yeah, that's where I like burning the master, because waiting on both of those sharks can be annoying. Another thing I haven't really mentioned is that these wall jumps, you're not supposed to be able to skip the first one like I was, but double jumping with Tana is just like good enough that you can barely make the second one usually. And it saves time because the wall jumps are pretty time consuming. And then there I used Tana's grapple to kind of just like, it suspends you in the air, and they gave me enough hang time to just like wait for the rope to come back. Eyes on target. But yeah, so yeah, that was all this level. So there's 3 alternate characters that aren't Crash or Coco. And each of them you play as twice in any percent. There are also levels called alternate timelines that you unlock when you unlock the characters and as you progress, but they're all optional levels, so they're not done in any percent. So yeah, we'll see Tana again like much later in the run. Alright, so this is Jetboard Jetty. Both casually and in the run itself, this is like the first real difficulty spike in the game. This level is pretty brutal. So I have to wait on this rope cycle, but the next rope you can actually just barely catch if you have the right movement, so we'll see if I get it. Nice. Yeah, that's actually really tight to get. Like, you have to have pretty proper movement. So this side scroller section is generally annoying, but there's a way to, like, you can do enough to bypass most of it. So we'll see if I get all of it. Nice. Yeah, that's about as good as I can get off of that cycle. I would like to hold on to this mask because it'll be useful at the very end of the level, but if not, it's also just like a nice safety precaution for just some of the hazards in the end, because the last jetboard section of this level is very, very treacherous. It's very easy to get hit during it. So having the masks as like like a safety precaution is always nice. But ideally, I want to take both of these to the very end of the level for something that's there. We'll see if I get that. Oh, I lost one of them. See if I can keep the second one. Nope, we lost that one also. Alright, so this is going to be a little slow at the end then. So this is the only game that has, the only level in the game that has a mini boss, and this is Luis. And we don't like Luis. This is a very, very annoying fight. So you have to guide these rats into Luis's tentacles, and you have to kill all 6 of them, and it's very obnoxious. Alright, so I have a pretty consistent setup for this. I've messed it up recently, but I didn't mess it up this time, which is nice. Yeah, so you can actually use masks to damage abuse through Luis, and if you time it properly, it actually hurts the tentacles, so you can take out 2 of them really quickly that way, which is why I wanted to keep the masks, but it just didn't pan out that way. So yeah, there's actually a $300 bounty on that fight for anybody who finds a way to skip it, because nobody likes that fight. But it remains unclaimed. Alright, so this is Tranquility Falls. This hub is where stuff gets really, really cool. This first level is really straightforward, but the other 2 levels in the hub are really sick. And this is the hub that introduces us to the second quantum mask, which is Akano. And Akano gives us the Dark Matter spin, which is basically like it's the Death Tornado spin from Crash 3, but better, because you can do it indefinitely, and it lets just let you get like a lot of airtime like this. You don't want to constantly be in it though, because it's actually very slow. Like it gives you a bit of a speed boost if you do it out of like a slide spin, but using it for too long will definitely slow you down. But Akano has a lot of really cool like tech involving like the physics of using them, so just a little damage boost there so we don't have to wait on TNTs. Yeah, other than that, there's not too much with this level. This is really just the level that introduces you to what Akano can do, and we'll definitely see him be really crazy throughout most of this run. Alright, and yeah, that was Give It a Spin. Alright, so the next level is Dragon On. I actually really don't like this level. I think it's a really obnoxious level. It's very, very cycle heavy, and the cycles can be very difficult to hit. And if you end up waiting on them, it loses a lot of time. So yeah, I do... The movement I did there stopped that Gong guy's cycle from activating. Because waiting on these Gong attacks is very annoying. Thankfully I can slide spin under that one because there's a little gap in the platforms. But these next ones I'm just going to have to jump over like that. Or just be faster then. That being said, there is one cool strat that this level has. Aside from the fact that something you'll notice is that if you trigger a Kano right after you bounce off of something, you get a lot of height, which is going to be useful right here. So that's not supposed to be possible. That's just a little out of bounds thing that skips going around that entire building. The biggest thing about it is that it stops those two dragons cycles from working, and waiting on those dragons is very annoying. So it ends up saving, like, I want to say like 15 seconds or so. So it's very nice. That was the perfect example of what happens if you get hit by the gongs. Thankfully, like, these two gongs, if you get hit by them, you actually have enough time to, like, jump back. Most of the other gongs will auto-kill you if you get hit by them, just because they push you out too far. Alright. That wasn't too bad. Just a little rough stuff here and there. Alright, so the next level is Off Balance, and this honestly has to be one of my favorite levels in the entire run. In the entire game in general, like, even casually, I think this level is really cool, but it's so sick in 90%. Alright, so this is the first instance of, like, wall running. Wall running is kind of slow, though, so you avoid it where you can. Fortunately, we have to wait on this cycle. I don't think anybody's figured out a way to catch that in time. So there's like there's multiple layers to this trick. So first off, well, that's not what I wanted to do, so we'll do a backup here. I was trying to bounce off that checkpoint, but you can bounce off of this instead, which is almost as effective. That didn't work either. Alright. Alright, so by bouncing off that crate, it gave me enough height where I actually bypassed the trigger that gets rid of Akano. So now I still have him at a point where I'm not supposed to. And that lets me do this cool thing here where I can just get wall bounces off of using Akano. So this cycle's really messed up just because I screwed up the skip a little bit. It's not really a big deal though. Alright. And then you can actually get up here. And that skips a good, like, 40 seconds of the level. You just use Akano to just fly to the very end of it. Even with all the flubs I had, that is still definitely a time save over doing the level normally, because that entire last section is, like, a huge auto-scroller where you have to wait on a lot of stuff. And that's definitely, like, one of my favorite skips in the game. Alright, so this is the second boss fight with Brio. He's basically the same thing as when you fight him in Crash 1. But he's also annoying because he's the only boss fight that doesn't have like a large amount of checkpoints. I also like messing with his dialogue there, so I made him say stop for science. But yeah, basically you just avoid his like first set of beakers and then you just shoot the blobs back at him. Gelatinous fiddlesticks. Yeah.
Enjoy your trip. This one has extra babachulin. Ooze your way to
Alright, so this is the only checkpoint in the fight, which is when he's about to transform into like his monster form. So the way we have to fight the monster form in this game is that we have to push him off, and we can only do that with Akano. Although there's a really interesting property where if you hit him towards an edge and then immediately go out of Akano, for some reason he gets hit again. So it lets you like knock him off the edge in like one shot for every phase. And we'll definitely be abusing that. Just like that. I have to be careful though, because like getting hit by any of those shockwaves is just like an auto kill, and it puts me back at the beginning of the monster phase. The shockwaves move really slow though, so you can kind of just like stand here and just like wait for them. But yeah, that's that fight. Alright, so we have to wait for a long time here because these prompts just pop up. So the first one is telling us that we just unlocked the inverted levels, which is just like just mirror mode with some interesting like visual gimmicks. And then there's another prompt coming up here that tells us we unlocked the classic Crash skin, but you can actually like skip a cutscene here and then start moving before the prompt comes up, and it saves time because normally you would have to close the prompt and then start moving on the rail. So having the prompt pop up while you're on the rail essentially just negates the fact that it even exists. Alright, so this is Offbeat. This is like... Casually, this is one of the most beloved levels in the game. Speed-wise, this is one of the most widely reviled levels in the game. The reason being that the way cycles work in this level are very unique and different from the rest of the game. So most cycles in this game are proximity based, where they start moving when you reach a certain point in the level. Any other cycle is generally like what we call a global cycle, which isn't exactly the same as like the global cycles in the original Crash games, but it's the sense that like the cycles are moving the moment the level starts. I've never reached that far up in the air, but okay. What makes this level annoying is that the cycles work in a way where they're actually in tune with the, or in sync with the music. So if you die, like I just did, it actually makes like everything just like out of sync with what you're used to. So like I'm gonna end up doing a lot of waiting just for that one accidental death. It makes the level very frustrating to run because like even like a minor error can lose you a lot of time because of how heavy this level is on cycles. See if I can catch a specific cycle here. Nope. Alright, whatever. I flubbed the movement there. You can actually catch this, like, pink cube if you're fast enough, but I wasn't. Alright, I wouldn't normally get this checkpoint because it's out of the way, but because this is a resetless run, and dying in this level is extremely punishing, I just decided to grab it. Alright, so the rest of this level is just about, like, a minute of rails. Yeah, so after this rail section, the level just immediately ends. Yeah, overall, this is a really cool level. I think aesthetically, it's very, very beautiful. And the gimmick of it is really neat, but it's just really frustrating in a speedrun setting because it's so easy to lose time in this level. Like, it definitely is one of the hardest levels in the run, if not the hardest. Alright, so coming up is the next alternate character. And this one's going to be Dingodile. So Dingodile, kind of like Tana, doesn't really have too much in this sense of like movement tech for like speeding him up. He doesn't really have anything. But he's got a lot of movement options, so a lot of the optimization of this level is just like corner cuts and such. Also, you're supposed to throw those TNT barrels into these walls, but for some reason in this level only, you can just spin through every obstacle, so I actually will not pick up a single TNT barrel through the entire level.
Ah, bastards! They'll get every last one of yous.
And then same with these like vats, you can also just spin through there. So I'm gonna try a cool little thing here. Alright, cool, I got it. That was found very recently by a runner named Serenade Yuki. He found out that you can just stand on the side of that sign and it just saves a little bit of time.
I made all them tablecloths myself.
But yeah, so basically Dingodile also has a spin attack, but his main gimmick is his vacuum that he has. He can use it to hover like this, and he can use it to pull in crates and enemies. That we won't really see aside from like 1 or 2 spots. And we won't see any of it in this level. And then I intentionally did a damage boost there because it let me run across that conveyor belt, which is just a little bit faster.
Nice.
And I abuse standing on the TNT there to just jump over those nitros. Yeah. I actually think this level is really cool, just optimizing it to just cut as many corners as possible. And it's like, this game's weird, where sometimes there's invisible walls that just block your progress, and then other times there just aren't. This level is thankfully one where most of the time there isn't, but there's a few instances where there are. Like right there, I couldn't fully cut that corner because there's an invisible wall. But I can cut this corner here. The camera screws up a little bit here, like it's supposed to follow you further, closer than that, but thankfully it fixes itself right there.
How do you like them?
But yep, that was home cooking. And again, we'll see Dingodile like really much later in the run. And the next level is Run It By You, and this is probably the single, like, craziest skip in the run. Well, actually maybe not. It's definitely one of them. But this level, this is another one of those levels like Jetboard Jetty, where it's, casually it's just notorious for being a very difficult level. And in any percent, it would be difficult if it weren't for the, like, big skip in it. It is still a very scary level, though, because failing the skip is very, very costly. So we'll see how it goes. That was almost really bad. So most of this level is pretty straightforward. So I'm gonna grab this mask as a safety precaution. And then hopefully not hit any of these mines. Oh, that was interesting. Alright. So you're supposed to follow that armadillo, like, food truck or whatever. But instead, we're just going to jump over the wall and go out of bounds like this. I actually have to jump over that alligator because for some reason it actually has a hitbox and can hurt you. So I'm going to actually specifically line up with this like tree right here because I have to be in a specific position to hit the trigger that will put me on the jet board. And then by reeling back to the left there, it fixes the camera, and then from this point on I can just go to the end of the level. So I had to be very careful there. There were some invisible nitro and mines. The way this game works when things don't load properly is that they're still there. You just can't see them. So that's what makes this so scary, is that you can accidentally die to something that you can't even see. But overall, that went really well. So, yep, that was Run It By You. Sorry for my cat in the background. She gets kind of chatty every here and then.
Right then. Need a hand.
Alright, so next up is the Snow Hub, the 11th dimension. There was a point in time where I considered this probably the easiest hub. I don't know if I think that anymore. It can get pretty rough. So this level is Snow Way Out. This is going to be the first instance of the third Quantum Mask, Kapunawa, and she's the Quantum Mask of Time. And there's some really crazy stuff you can do with her. Starting with what I call the Time Warp. So basically, when you activate Kapunawa, she slows down time until you either tell her not to or after a few seconds. But for some reason, there's this glitch where if you slow down time and then immediately speed it back up, you kind of just warp forward like this. And there's two mask trigger buttons, which are triangle and R2. So if you just press them simultaneously, you get that little skip ahead. And like optimally, you would use it at every possible moment, but that's just like so ridiculously tight input-wise that it's kind of impractical. So it's kind of just a thing where we throw in where we can. And it's definitely we're starting to use it more than we did in the past. Like before, it was only really used in like one part in the next level, but recently it's just started to be used just everywhere where you can get Kapunawa. Like there. Alright, so that didn't go exactly the way I wanted to. You can actually bypass all of that, but I think the time warping messed up the cycle. And then here I'll just use it to just... since it bolts you a little bit ahead, it's just nice for... It's just like really minor time save that adds up. I actually thought I wasn't going to make that jump. Alright, that was really nice. Alright, so the next level is Stay Frosty. I don't actually think this level is that hard, but it's very, very bad to mess up. This is about the point in the game where checkpoints start to become really sparse, so deaths become more and more unforgiving. And this level is very, very punishing on deaths. So I hugged the left there because it actually causes that shark cycle to be late. Otherwise, I would have to wait on it. And then I'm going to use more time warping here. Not exactly the way I wanted to. Alright, so sometimes you can deload stuff there when you time warp on the rails. I don't know what exactly causes it, but thankfully it didn't happen that time. I don't get it too often. here. We're gonna use Kapuna again. Nice. All right. This is probably the most straightforward of all the levels in this hub. There's actually not too much crazy going on here. Again, I just threw in a little time warp there. Alright, so that's like all the platforming out of the way. Because the last part of this level is a polar bear section. So, casually, Polar is not very well liked in this game. Controlling him is very, very annoying, especially when you have to break crates. For some reason, if you're just like going neutral the whole time and just moving left and right, Polar is an absolute pain in the ass to control. But if you hold forward on the analog stick and there's a slightly alter your angle, it becomes more manageable. Definitely not good, but manageable. But yeah. Thankfully in any percent we don't have to worry about crates, so this is kind of just like a nice little grace period. The only thing you have to really worry about is just charging with Polar. And unlike Crash 2, where you could cancel like charge cooldown by jumping, you can't really do that in this. The cooldown happens no matter what, so it's really just a matter of just charging as much as you can. Alright, so this is the only time we actually see Polar, but there will be another creature just like him later on in the run. About 2 hubs from now. Alright, so next up is the third boss fight with Cortex. I actually think this is the hardest boss fight in the game. It's very, very easy to die in. So hopefully that doesn't happen. So the gimmick with this fight is that you use Kapunawa to slow down all of his attacks, but doing so, when you slow down the attacks, you slow down the fight. So optimally, you almost never want to use her until the punch bot that you have to send back to him comes out, which is part of what makes this fight so scary, is that you have to deal with all this in real time. So in these next 2 phases, it's going to look like I'm flexing by walking. I swear to God, this is just the easiest way to do this.
Well, if you won't play fair, then neither will I. Oops, did I do that? the Bandicoot, crush the Bandicoot, smash its head.
Alright, so this cycle's really bad to mess up, so hopefully I don't die.
If I hit all the buttons at once. Feel the wrath of Cortex.
Alright, good. Alright, so I'm gonna do something a little different in this next part. In terms of transitioning to hubs. Instead of riding the rail, I'm actually gonna re-enter the boss fight. And then from the boss fight, I can actually pick the next level in the next hub. The reason I do that there is that it saves a little bit of time loadless, even if it might be slower RTA. And since we do loadless timing, it's just like a minor optimization. I don't entirely agree with its existence. I was really hoping that wouldn't happen. Oh well, that actually lines up the rest of this cycle to be fine, but I was trying to just bypass it. But yeah, so the reason in particular that that was the first time I did that strat is because when you transition from the 11th dimension to this hub, the Aegipus dimension, there's actually a really long animation where Cortex kind of just like falls flat on his face in front of a level and then like gets up, and it just takes a long time. So it's just faster to re-enter the boss fight and then from there just enter this level, Blast of the Past, because it just skips that animation entirely, and it costs like maybe 2 seconds to do that over the like several seconds it takes to watch that animation. Most hubs it doesn't make a difference, or like a noticeable one. It's like a half a second at most, but this hub and another hub coming up are like the two notable exceptions. So here we're going to see more Kapunawa tech. That was a really weird cycle. Alright. That wasn't too bad though. Overall, that wasn't the worst Blast of the Past. Really, the only bad thing was the death at the beginning. But the biggest convenience about that death is that if it happens, the cycle just lines up that you can just run through it anyway. So it was just like a really minor death. Alright. Alright, so this is Fossil Field, and this introduces the fourth and final character, Cortex. And Cortex would be such a cool character if he worked properly. Like, so he actually has movement tech. He's got this little air dash. Unfortunately, Cortex is not really good in the aiming department. And very often you'll have instances where you'll like try to fire in a direction or like jump in a direction and he just won't. Also, I'm not even sure how I fell down there. So like really that's just the most annoying part of Cortex, is it feels like you're fighting himself. Alright, so I'm actually going to do a Death Abuse here. And it's the only time you're going to see me, or it's one of the only 2 times you're going to see me intentionally do that. The reason I do it there is that it makes these cycles in this entire 2D section line up a lot better. I'm going to do a little skip here. It just skips the entire right side. In terms of time save, I think it only saves like 2 seconds if it saves that at all. But the cycles you get from it are so much easier that it just kind of makes it feel worth it to me anyway. I missed that cycle. Alright. Cortex especially does not work super well in the 3D sections. It's where like his aiming being an issue is like at its most prominent.
Haven't seen mushrooms that big since I left the Gigantizotron running overnight.
Try it again. Yeah, Cortex is just weird. There's so much cool stuff he can do, but it's just so frustrating playing as him sometimes. Thankfully, that didn't go too bad. Yeah, another, like, the reason that Death Abuse is even, like, valid as a strat is because, so this is something I actually only found out, like, a few days ago. When you die in this game, you can actually skip the, death animation by pressing triangle. So it forces the respawn faster, and that's, like, the only reason that even is at least comparable to just doing it normally. Alright, so this is Dino Dash. This level is, like, really, actually, like, pretty hard to do fast, so we'll see where it goes. That opening is actually probably, like, the most threatening part of it, or even this part. This entire, like, up to the first checkpoint is just scary, because you got so many enemies you have to avoid. So, this is a section where, this is a level where you spend most of being chased by this dinosaur. Alright. So again, we'll be getting chased by the same dinosaur when he finds us. Yep. Alright, so this section is actually pretty rough, but there's very specific movement you can do to just, like, not have to wait on any of those cycles, which is really nice. But it can be very tricky to do. There you have to really abuse the fact that sliding just, like, halts your gravity. And, like, they intended it to be like that. But it's definitely, like, a rough section that catches a lot of players. Alright. And that was Dino Dash.
May I assist?
Alright, so we just unlocked the final Quantum Mask, Ika Ika. And he's the Quantum Mask of Gravity. And we'll see him very prominently in this next hub, which is Bermugula's Orbit. Alright, so I actually have him here, but I'm not going to use him. Just because there's no point in this section. But we will see him later in this level. you can actually get through that cycle, but the way those iron crates like sync up is not consistent. So I just never go for it because it's like a couple seconds to get it. It saves like maybe a second if you get it, and it loses a lot of time if you fail it. So that was like the little first bit of anti-grav that we'll see, and there'll be a lot more of it coming up. Okay. Something you're also going to see me abuse a lot with Ika Ika is switching to anti-grav and then immediately switching back to normal grav. You can't spam it, like you're locked to only using Ika Ika twice in one jump. Obviously, it's to stop you from just constantly going back and forth. But it lets you do stuff like this. Well, that's not a death I wanted. Alright. These cycles are kind of bad when you die, so hopefully it's not too bad. You know, I'll take it. I didn't mean to body slam there, but, you know, that works. But yeah, you'll see me use like the double gravity shift just to like increase like horizontal airtime, which is like one of the biggest assets of Ika Ika for sure. So the next level is Stowing Away. I would actually say this is like a pretty... This is like a... This might actually be the last, like, I guess, relaxing level in the run. Or, like, not really, like, tense.
Hey, where'd my cart go?
I don't bother with that mask because it like is actually kind of weird to get it, and it doesn't protect you from any of these weird like waffle iron things. So ultimately, the mask just doesn't really do much. You don't really need it for like any part later in the level either. So it usually just ends up being superfluous.
My sixth cart stolen this year. My worst.
It would be useful if you could damage abuse through those waffle irons without getting killed by them, but they are instant death, so it doesn't really work out.
Asteroid field ahead. Buckle your
Alright.
seatbelts. We're hit. Unbuckle those seatbelts and fix my gear. Quickly, minions. Prepare master and escape pod.
And yep, that was Stowing Away. Alright, so this is Crash Landed. This is honestly one of the coolest levels in the game. It's a pretty difficult one, and it's also pretty long, but there's a lot of really neat stuff going on in it. So first off, coming up here is another vehicle-ish thing. So this is a Schnurgle. His name is Tim. And we're going to use Tim in the same way that we controlled Polar. They actually control like exactly the same. So yeah, I'm gonna actually try and hold on to both of these masks, because this is the only level in the entire run where we actually like have the opportunity to use triple mask. Which doesn't really affect your speed at all, so across most of the run it's not really necessary. And it's not entirely necessary here. It just makes this next section coming up a lot easier. So here's going to be more anti-grav shenanigans. I have to be careful there, because with the anti-grav, there's death planes on both the top and the bottom. So I have to stay within a certain range to not get killed. From here, the masks don't really matter, and the game gives you a lot of them in this level, so that was just a completely appropriate damage abuse to take. Also, say hello to Tim again. So the rest of this level is just riding Tim to the end of it. I did not trust me to make that jump. Yeah, so again, most of this at this point is pretty straightforward. You can like charge on some of these turtles, but it can be very tricky. And dying obviously is a pretty big time loss, so. Alright. So next up is the fourth boss fight, which is with Entropy and alternate reality female Entropy. I'm actually going to switch to Crash for this, for something I don't do in a run, but in a marathon setting I would do it just because it's a really funny Easter egg. I thought I was going to die. So yeah, these are Boompa Berries, and there's something that happens if you collect all of them. All right. They actually put that they put that meme in the game.
Bandicoots are considered pests. Is fit for extermination as a housefly.
Normally in the run, I don't even like on a PB attempt, I don't even bother with it. because that entire railway section, you can do nothing and be fine. So it's a nice like minute-and-a-half break. But for a marathon setting, it's just funny to show that off. This Kapunawa section is actually really tricky.
So many little legs to pull. Our last puppy has found its way home.
Let's put them down. Activate the security lasers. Enough! I won't be foiled by a flea bag.
So yeah, this fight is really just like, at this point you just have to break these little lasers.
I'll squash this bug.
Nice. Alright, so this is another case where I'm going to re-enter the level I was just in. Reason being, there's a really, really long animation when you go to the next dimension. So it just saves time loadless to re-enter the fight and then enter the next level food run from the fight. Because it just skips an entire animation of all the characters landing in front of their levels. Alright. So food run is a really neat level. It kind of just like shows off... It shows off all 4 masks. Well, it's supposed to. We're going to skip one of them. It's also just like a really pretty level. So here we're gonna see more abusing anti-grav. So yeah, this is the first of like 2 levels I would say that kind of just like puts your entire knowledge of masks to the test. Oh, okay. Was surprised I didn't break all of those, but okay. Alright, so gonna be some cool stuff with Ika Ika here. First off, we can just completely bypass this wall running section by just abusing the anti-grav. And then, you're not supposed to be able to do this, but we can use this to just dodge this last section with Lonnie Loli. So this is normally slower, but we can just do this, and then from here we can just walk out of bounds, and it just skips that entire section with the cars at the end. So you're supposed to use all 4 masks, but we just completely skip Lonnie Loli because this section is slow. Alright, so coming up next is the longest level in the game. This is Rush Hour. When you're going for full completion, this level is notoriously very, very frustrating. In any percent, it's really not frustrating. But it's very, very boring. Like, there's really not a lot going on in this level.
Let's see if these tall
So yeah,
bobbies know how to
this is the second level where you play as both Dingodile and Tawna in this level, which is why this level is so long. It kind of actually feels like it was supposed to be 2 levels, and they just condensed it into 1. Yeah, this is gonna be like the one instance of me actually picking up mask, or a crate rather. I have to be very careful to not die, because checkpoints are very, very sparse in this level. A single mistake at the wrong point can cost you like 40 seconds to a minute. Like, this is 55 seconds in, and that is the first checkpoint in the level. So this next section coming up is probably the most annoying part of the level. Or at least the Dingodile section of the level. I'm actually going to grab this mask. You end up having to wait on these cycles anyway, so it doesn't actually lose any time to grab it and just damage abuse there. Sometimes you can save it for later, I just didn't happen to get it there.
I eat my franchise because I saw my future franchise. Oh, bollocks, my head hurts.
Yeah.
Wonder what the
So,
local
funnily enough, that is the hardest part of the level out of the way.
spicy and fried.
Because Tawna's section is the longer section, but it is almost all auto-scroller. It really is just like constant rails like this. And there's like some cool stuff you can do, but overall there's really not too much to this section. Now there's a little cool thing you can do here. You can actually jump on that rail from the bottom, which saves the time of going up the elevator. And then there I can use that trampoline robot to dodge using the wall jump to get on the rails. So yeah, Tawna's section is overall not too difficult, but dying in between the rail sections is very, very punishing because of how slow it is and how long it takes to get through them. So this is the first of what I guess would be the Frogger sections. That's the easier of the two, thankfully.
Oh yeah!
Okay, so last to add to the auto scrollers, we ride this car all the way to the last section, which is an extended Frogger section. So we'll see where this goes. Huh, that actually went extremely well.
Spicy fried mystery food.
Alright, so the next level is the Crate Escape, and this is the last level with Cortex. So I used to actually really hate this level, but as time has gone on, at least in any percent, I've grown like a bit of an appreciation for it. Like there's some cool stuff going on in it. It still can be pretty frustrating though, just because it is Cortex. Like that. Like that. Just cannot aim. So you'll notice with Cortex's air dashes that I cut a lot of them off prematurely. The reason is that if you do a grounded dash and then jump before the ground below you disappears, essentially, you'll actually be able to do a second dash. But if you cut it off while it's in the air, you lose your ability to do another one. So I call this section the garbage section. From here, it's actually, thankfully, mostly pretty straightforward. But I have died in this section, so... So, context story-wise, this is where Cortex betrays us after he had helped us beat the Entropies. I don't even know how I died there. But okay. Thankfully, that was a pretty small death, so, you know, whatever. Alright. Yeah, that was probably like an 8-second death. It really wasn't too bad. So, we're coming up to the final hub, which, in context of the plot, this is where Cortex goes back in time to the events of right before Crash 1 to try and stop Crash from being created. But yeah. So these last 3 levels are 3 of the absolute coolest levels in the game. They are also 3 of the most terrifying levels in the game, starting off with nitro processing. This level is hard. So, but it's got, again, one of the coolest skips. So we'll see if we get this. So yeah, we have Ika Ika here again. I'm gonna play this a little safe. So there's a little part here where we can bypass the invisible wall, and by doing that we're able to bypass the trigger that gets rid of Ika Ika, and therefore we can carry him through basically the rest of the level. Which lets us do things that are very blatantly not supposed to be possible, like this. But it gets crazier from here, and hopefully I don't mess it up. I actually messed this up in my PB, so it would be nice to not do that. Not over yet, though. Alright. That should be fine. There we go. That was a little gross. But basically what I did there's an entire room where you kind of like wrap around the left, and then you end up in this section. So that skip basically just cuts out all of that and saves about probably 15 to 20 seconds. The depth of use there was just so stuff would stop despawning. It's a little slow, but it's a hell of a lot safer because going through this stuff invisible can be very annoying. So you can actually carry Ika Ika past this section also. I don't actually know how much time it saves, and using Kapunawa isn't too bad, and it's like pretty safe, so yeah. So I want to say, to show the difficulty of this last hub, I'm a minute ahead of my PB. And I'm not even convinced that this will successfully PB because I've killed so many runs that were this far ahead, this far in. So, especially with this level, Toxic Tunnels, in my opinion, and the opinion of many, many people, including the current record holder, Jordy, this is the hardest level in the run. There's just a lot of like crazy like cycle skips going on. So like this level actually has a lot of cool optimization to it, but with every optimization that gets found, the level just becomes harder and harder. And casually, it's already probably like one of the hardest levels, if not the hardest, so it kind of just exacerbates it. This is also the last level that has no quantum masks at all. This is just you doing everything that like Crash and Coco can do at their basic. Alright, so that was a little slow there, so I'm just gonna roll with that. That rat is the single most annoying enemy in the game, so I just choose not to mess with him. Alright, so there's some cycles here I want to be able to catch, hopefully. I was not successful, I second-guessed myself. That's really bad. I got bonked, dude. That's actually kind of sad. This is why I'm not attached to the run yet. Alright. So yeah, a little trick there. You can actually land on the electric orb. It dropped my double jump! Oh my god. The level's just like pulling out all the stops here. I'm so used to this with Toxic Tunnels that it doesn't even like phase me anymore, but it is like kind of depressing.
What must I do to prove myself? Mother's name, Sharon. Childhood pet, rock with googly eyes. Favorite food, buttered noodles. Butter on the side. Embryo, change the
Yeah, so we're losing a lot of time here, sadly. Kind of just happens with this level. Like, this level being at the very end of the run is very stressful because stuff like that can just happen. It's such a cool level, but it is such a nerve-wracking one for sure. But I think overall it is definitely one of the best levels in the game. Yeah, so that's a really tragic turn of events. Alright, let's see if we can close it out with Cortex Castle, though. So this is the last level in the game before the final boss. And it's definitely one of the coolest final levels in any game.
You'll never find me, Neo-Cortex. This castle is a maze. I alone know all of its secret halls and
Yeah, this level basically puts everything you learn throughout the game to the test. It makes heavy use of all 4 quantum masks.
I tied it up to here with your games, you lout. Lout? Why, I never.
What is it? Am I seeing double?
Embryo, quickly, revoke this fraud hologram access. No, Embryo,
Sorry for the silence, I am very much focusing.
future, you must listen to me. Embryo, do you not recognize your own master? I'm the real Cortex. No,
Oh my god. Oh, that's such an annoying mistake. I just flubbed the movement. Alright, I saved it there. Alright, that's better. I actually really want to keep this mask because there's a very important damage abuse at the end of the level, so hopefully that doesn't pan out badly.
quit struggling. Don't make me.
That was very weird. I don't know how I got a crouch there.
We have an evil doppelganger.
Or a crawl, rather.
I'm not a doppelganger.
Wow! I guess we won't show off the damage abuse. But yeah, this last section is really cool. So ideally I would damage abuse through this section, but since I died, I can't. So this is exactly what I meant by not being attached even at the end of the run. This is very much a common occurrence with this game. Regardless though, this run was actually pretty solid up until the end, so whatever. So yeah, coming up next is the final boss. And this boss is really cool because now Cortex uses all the quantum masks against you.
Did you jump on the shoot-o-matic? Unbelievable! Assistant, go! Unbelievable! Just relax and accept non-existence. Shoot-o-matic! Shoot! Unbelievable! Assistant, go! Time out! Time out! Annihilator! Fire!
Alright.
I can smell your fleas boiling. Careful, I might slip.
So by going all the way left here, not only does it set up to quickly take out the next laser, but
I can see your
it also just lets you dodge
themselves.
part of this cycle. Just the rightmost one will never hit you.
Stop that! Assistant, go!
Alright, so this next phase is probably the hardest one because we actually do specific movement to skip a lot of the cycle. So going to the left here just stops, lets us bypass this entire part here.
Set. Power before cortex. Unbelievable.
And then from here, to do a very specific slide jump that I barely made.
Go!
Thankfully that went well. That's definitely the scariest part of the fight. But this phase is also pretty tricky.
Bored of your shenanigans.
Alright, so timing ends when I deal the final hit to Cortex, which is shooting the last assistant at him.
Blast it! Assistant, help!
There's always room for improvement, I guess.
It was pretty close to another PB. But yeah. And that was Crash Bandicoot 4. It's about time any percent. I hope you guys really enjoyed it, and I hope you consider it for the marathon. And, yep, thanks for watching, guys.